Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Mark stared at his wedding photo, the silver frame catching the late afternoon light streaming through his home office window. In the image, he and Emily beamed at each other, young and in love, their whole lives ahead of them. 8 years had passed since that day, but it felt like a lifetime ago that he set the frame face down on his desk, a gesture that had become habit over the past few months. The happy couple in that photo no longer existed. In their place were two strangers sharing a house. Their conversations reduced to mundane discussions about bills and schedules. The sound of the garage door opening pulled him from his thoughts. Emily was home early for once. Mark checked his watch, 6:30 p.m. She usually didn't return until well after 8 these days. He listened to her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, tracking her movement through the house. "Emily," he called out. The footsteps paused. "Yes? I was thinking we could order from that new Thai place tonight. Have dinner together?" A lengthy silence followed. "I already ate at the office. The Morgan account is keeping us busy." Of course it was. The Morgan account had become her universal excuse. Mark pushed back from his desk, walking to the kitchen where Emily stood checking the mail. Her designer blazer was still crisp despite the long day, not a hair out of place in her carefully styled bob. "The Morgan account," he repeated. "Funny how one client can consume so much time." Emily's shoulders tensed slightly. "It's a major deal, Mark. You know how important this is for the firm. More important than your marriage." She slammed the mail down on the counter. "Don't start. I'm not in the mood for another lecture about how I'm never home. When was the last time we had dinner together? Or watched a movie? Or did anything as a couple? I don't keep track." Emily brushed past him, heading for the stairs. "And I don't appreciate being ambushed the moment I walk in the door." Mark followed her. "It's ambushing now? To want to spend time with my wife? This is exactly why I work late." She spun to face him halfway up the stairs. "Every time I'm home, you're suffocating me with demands for attention. I need space, Mark. I need time to focus on my career." "Your career?" He laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call those late-night strategy sessions?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just wondering why strategy requires so many dinner meetings, and weekend conferences, and late-night calls in the bathroom when you think I'm asleep. Are you spying on me?" "I'm observing my wife pulling away from me." "There's a difference." Emily descended a few steps until they were eye level. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. My work is important to me. If you can't handle having a successful wife who doesn't run every decision by you, that's your problem, not mine." "This isn't about success," Mark said quietly. "This is about respect, honesty. Remember those wedding vows we took? The ones about honoring each other?" "Oh, for God's sake." Emily threw up her hands. "I'm going to take a shower. When I come out, I expect this interrogation to be over." She stormed up the stairs, leaving Mark standing there, his hands clenched in fists at his sides. The shower started running moments later, and with it came a familiar sound, the soft ding of Emily's phone receiving a message. Mark looked up the stairs, listening to the water run. The phone would be in her blazer pocket, probably tossed on the bathroom counter. It had been weeks since he'd last checked it, promising himself he wouldn't become the paranoid, suspicious husband, but as he climbed the stairs, his footsteps silent against the carpet, he knew that paranoia had nothing to do with it. The signs were all there: the late nights, the defensive behavior, the constant phone checks. He wasn't imagining the distance growing between them. He wasn't inventing the way she recoiled from his touch, or how she always seemed to be texting someone when she thought he wasn't looking. The bathroom door was closed, steam seeping out beneath it. Emily's blazer lay draped over the hallway chair, her phone visible in the pocket. Mark's heart pounded as he reached for it. This was the moment he could either remain in denial, or he could face whatever truth lay behind that locked screen. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he returned to their bedroom. Emily had never changed the password from their anniversary date. For digits that once represented their love, now about to reveal its destruction, his fingers trembled as he typed in the numbers. 1-0-2-2. The screen unlocked, revealing a message preview that made his blood run cold. "Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to taste you again. Mark sank onto the bed, his world tilting on its axis. In that moment, as the shower continued to run and his wife hummed tunelessly behind the bathroom door, he began to understand that everything he thought he knew about his marriage had been a lie, and this was just the beginning. For the next week, Mark lived in a state of controlled fury. Each morning, he kissed Emily goodbye as if nothing had changed. Each evening, he watched her leave for her late meetings, knowing exactly where she was going and with whom. The messages on her phone had told him everything. Jacob, a client from her firm, or so she claimed in their texts. Their affair had been going on for 6 months, their rendezvous carefully planned around Mark's schedule. They met at high-end hotels, restaurants where Mark would never think to look, and sometimes the thought made his stomach turn. In Jacob's downtown apartment, Mark sat in his home office, scrolling through the screenshots he'd taken of their conversations. He'd created a detailed timeline of their affair, each date and location meticulously documented. The evidence was damning, but it wasn't just the physical betrayal that cut him to the core. It was the way they talked about him. Poor Mark, Emily had written. He actually suggested couples therapy today, as if talking about our feelings would make me want him again. Jacob's response had been cruel. Some men just don't get it. They think being nice and reliable is enough. But you need more than that. Don't you, baby? So much more, Emily had replied. Things I could never do with him. He's too vanilla. Too safe. Mark's computer screen cracked under his grip. He forced himself to relax his fingers, taking deep breaths. He wouldn't let anger cloud his judgment. Not now. Not when he needed to think clearly. The front door opened downstairs. Emily's voice drifted up, speaking softly into her phone. Mark opened a new browser tab, hiding the evidence of his discovery. "I'll call you back," she said as she passed his office. "Yes, tomorrow same time." "I know. I miss you too." Mark's jaw clenched. He wondered if Jacob knew that Emily used the same lines on him that she'd once used with Mark. If he realized he wasn't special, just the newest player in her game. "Hey." Emily appeared in his doorway, wearing a new dress he hadn't seen before. "I'm going to that conference this weekend, remember? The one downtown." Mark nodded, maintaining his facade of ignorance. "Right? The marketing summit. I'll be gone Friday through Sunday. Try not to miss me too much." She attempted a playful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Which hotel is it at again?" "The Marriott." The lie came easily to her lips. "They're hosting all the keynote speakers there." Mark pulled up the Marriott's website. "Funny, I don't see any marketing events listed for this weekend." Emily's smile faltered. "It's a private conference. Industry professionals only." "Of course." Mark turned back to his computer. "Have fun with Jacob." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark could hear Emily's sharp intake of breath, could practically feel her mind racing for a denial. "What did you say?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. Mark swiveled his chair to face her. "Jacob, your client. The one you've been fucking for the past 6 months. Have fun with him this weekend." All color drained from Emily's face. "You've been spying on me?" "Spying?" Mark laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "I didn't need to spy, Emily. You got sloppy. Left your phone unlocked. Left your email logged in. Left breadcrumbs any idiot could follow. You had no right, no right?" Mark stood so quickly his chair slammed into the wall. "I'm your husband. I had every right to know you were making a fool of me." Emily stepped back, but her chin lifted defiantly. "Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Jacob. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" "What I want to hear is why. Why him? Why throw away 8 years of marriage? Because he makes me feel alive." Emily's voice rose, filling the office. "Because when I'm with him, I'm not just someone's wife. I'm not trapped in this suburban prison. Playing house with a man who thinks date night at Olive Garden is exciting." Mark absorbed each word like a physical blow, but he refused to show weakness. "So I'm boring? Too safe? Not enough of a man for you? You want the truth?" "No, you're not." Emily's words dripped with contempt. "Jacob gives me things you never could. Makes me feel things you never did." "Like what?" "Anal sex." Mark watched her flinch at his crude words. "Oh yes, I read all about that. How you begged him for it." "Funny, considering how many times you told me it was disgusting when I suggested it." Emily's face flushed red. You're just proving my point. Look at you, acting like a wounded little boy because your wife found someone better. Better? Mark's voice was ice. A man who sleeps with married women is better. At least he's not weak. Emily spat. At least he takes what he wants instead of begging for scraps of attention. Mark moved closer, watching her retreat until her back hit the doorframe. You think I'm weak, Emily? You think I'm just going to roll over and accept this? What are you going to do? She sneered, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. Cry? Beg me to go to counseling? Face it, Mark. You're not enough for me anymore. You never were. The last thread of hope, of possible reconciliation, snapped inside Mark's chest. He stepped back, his expression hardening into something Emily had never seen before. Get out. Emily blinked. What? Get your things and get out of my bedroom. Sleep in the guest room, the couch, your car, I don't care. But you don't get to fuck another man and sleep in my bed. This is my house too, not for long. Mark's voice was deadly calm. You want Jacob so badly? Go to him. But don't expect anything from me anymore. No support, no help, no friendship. As far as I'm concerned, you're already dead to me. Emily stared at him, seemingly thrown by this new, cold version of her husband. Finally, she straightened her spine. Fine, I'll sleep in the guest room. But don't think this little display of backbone changes anything. You'll get over this, Mark. You always do. Because that's what weak men do, they forgive and forget. She turned on her heel, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Mark waited until he heard the guest room door close before returning to his computer, opening a new email account under a false name. He began forwarding himself every message, every photo, every piece of evidence he'd gathered. Emily thought she knew him, thought she could predict his reactions. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching Mark's mood as he methodically stripped their bedroom. Every trace of Emily, her clothes, her jewelry, her precious collection of scented lotions he boxed and moved to the guest room while she was at work. Her protests upon returning home fell on deaf ears. This is childish, she snapped, watching him remove her photos from the walls. You're acting like a teenager. Mark continued his task without acknowledging her. Each item he removed felt like excising a tumor, cutting away the diseased parts of his life. Emily eventually stormed off, the guest room door slamming behind her late that night. As Emily slept, Mark began laying the groundwork for his response to her betrayal. His laptop screen cast a blue glow across his face as he worked, creating new email accounts, documenting timestamps, saving screenshots. Every message between Emily and Jacob was carefully cataloged and backed up to secure cloud storage. The evidence painted a devastating picture. Not only had Emily been physically unfaithful, but she'd shared intimate details of their marriage with Jacob. Their private struggles, Mark's insecurities, even their financial situations, all had become fodder for their cruel amusement. He actually cried during couples counseling. Emily had written in one message. Can you believe it? Talking about how he misses our emotional connection. God, it was pathetic. Jacob's response had been equally cutting. Sounds like someone needs his balls back. Good thing you found a real man. Mark's fingers tightened on his mouse, but he forced himself to continue reading. Each message strengthened his resolve, hardening his heart against any remaining sympathy for his wife. The next day, while Emily was at her conference with Jacob, Mark visited his bank. The teller's eyebrows rose as he transferred half of their joint savings into a private account, but she completed the transaction without comment. Will there be anything else, Mr. Harrison? Yes. Mark pulled out his phone, showing her the text messages he discovered. I'd like to document that this transfer was made after discovering my wife's infidelity. For the divorce proceedings, the teller's professional smile softened with understanding. She carefully noted the date and time of the transfer, adding her own signature as witness to his statement back home. Mark contacted a divorce lawyer, one specifically recommended for handling cases involving infidelity. The lawyer's response was swift and professional. Document everything. Every message, every receipt, every unexplained absence. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position. Mark smiled grimly. Evidence was something he had in abundance when Emily returned Sunday evening, she found Mark watching television in the living room, apparently absorbed in a basketball game. "If you're ready to discuss this rationally," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "Nothing to discuss." Mark didn't look away from the screen. "You've made your feelings quite clear." Emily shifted uncomfortably, thrown by his indifference. "So that's it? You're just going to ignore me?" "No, Emily." He finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to do much worse than that. I'm going to show you exactly how weak I am." She scoffed, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Is that supposed to be threatening?" "Not at all." Mark smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Just a promise." Emily opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Something in his tone made her uneasy. Without another word, she retreated to the guest room. Mark returned his attention to the television, but his mind was already racing with plans. Emily had destroyed their marriage, thinking him too weak to retaliate. She'd burned down 8 years of trust and commitment for a few thrills with Jacob. Now he would burn down her entire world. Starting with the carefully constructed lies she'd built around her affair, that as midnight approached, Mark began phase 1 of his plan. He created a detailed spreadsheet of Emily's schedule over the past 6 months, cross-referencing her work commitments with the hotel receipts he'd found in her email. The pattern was obvious. Every conference and late meeting corresponded with a hotel booking or a dinner reservation for 2. He also discovered something that made his blood boil. Emily had been using their joint credit card for some of these rendezvous. Dinner dates at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways at luxury hotels, all charged to the account they shared. She'd been funding her affair with their money. Mark documented every charge, every receipt. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. But it wasn't enough to simply leave her. No, Emily had done more than betray their vows. She'd humiliated him, mocked him, treated his love and loyalty as weaknesses to be exploited. His laptop pinged with a new email notification. The divorce lawyer had sent over preliminary paperwork, along with a strategy for handling the division of assets. Mark read through it carefully, noting how his documented evidence of Emily's infidelity would strengthen his position. The house creaked and settled around him as he worked through the night. From the guest room came the occasional sound of Emily's phone chiming, no doubt more messages from Jacob. Let them plot and plan, Mark thought. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. By dawn, Mark had compiled a devastating dossier of Emily's betrayal. Every message, every photo, every receipt, all organized and backed up in multiple locations. But this was just the beginning. Emily thought she knew him, thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. She was about to learn how wrong she was. As the first rays of sunlight crept through his office window, Mark finally closed his laptop. The man who had begged for his wife's attention, who had suggested couples therapy and date nights, who had tried desperately to save his marriage, that man was gone. In his place was someone Emily wouldn't recognize. Someone who would show her exactly how much damage a weak man could do when pushed too far. Mark stood, stretching his stiff muscles, and walked to the window. The neighborhood was coming alive with early morning activity: joggers, dog walkers, people leaving for work, all going about their normal routines, unaware that behind the perfectly maintained facade of the Harrison home, a war was about to begin. Emily had traded 8 years of marriage for 6 months of thrills. Now she would learn the true cost of that decision, and by the time Mark was finished, she would understand exactly how badly she had underestimated her husband. Mark sat in his parked car outside Jacob's downtown apartment building, his hands steady on the steering wheel as he watched people enter and exit through the glass doors. 3 weeks of methodical research had led him to this moment. Jacob lived in Unit 1103. Information Mark had gleaned from Emily's text messages detailing her visits. His phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Working late again." "Don't wait up." Mark's lip curled as he typed a response. "No problem. Take care." The casual exchange was part of his carefully crafted facade. For the past weeks, he played the role of the defeated husband perfectly, acting as though he'd accepted Emily's affair. He'd even started leaving the house during her late nights, pretending to visit friends or go to the gym. In reality, He was building a comprehensive profile of both Emily and Jacob's routines that a familiar figure emerged from the building: Jacob himself, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed new money. Mark's fingers tightened on the wheel as he watched the man who destroyed his marriage stroll to his BMW, probably heading to meet Emily. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Mark muttered, pulling out his notebook. He added another entry to his growing list of observations: 6:45 p.m., leaves apartment. Gray suit. BMW heading east, dinner with Emily? The notebook contained weeks of similar entries. Jacob's schedule was surprisingly predictable. Gym every morning at 5:30 a.m., office by 8 o'clock, lunch at the same 3 restaurants, drinks with colleagues on Thursdays. The man was a creature of habit, a weakness Mark intended to exploit. His phone rang, displaying Emily's number. Mark answered, keeping his voice neutral. "Hey," Emily said, sounding slightly breathless. "I forgot to mention I have that marketing conference next weekend. The one in Chicago." Mark allowed himself a small smile. Another lie. He'd already found the hotel reservation Jacob had made for them right here in the city. "Sure," he replied. "How long will you be gone?" "Just Friday through Sunday. The firm's covering everything." "I'm sure they are." Mark watched as Jacob's BMW turned onto the main street. "Have a good time?" "That's it." Emily's voice held a note of suspicion. "No questions? No accusations? Would it change anything if I did?" A pause. "No, I suppose not." "Then why waste the energy?" Mark kept his tone deliberately flat. "You're going to do what you want anyway." "Mark," Emily hesitated. "I know this is hard, but I appreciate how you're handling it. Being mature about everything." The sheer audacity of her statement made his blood boil, but his voice remained steady. "Goodbye, Emily." He ended the call and started his car, following Jacob's BMW at a safe distance. The evening traffic provided perfect cover as he tracked his quarry through the city streets. That Jacob's car finally pulled into the parking lot of La Maison, an upscale French restaurant. Minutes later, Emily's Audi joined it. Mark parked across the street, watching as the lovers met at the entrance. Exchanging a kiss that made his stomach turn, taking out his camera, Mark captured several clear shots of their greeting. More evidence for his growing collection. But simple documentation wasn't enough anymore. He needed to understand his targets completely, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. His phone buzzed with an email notification. His private investigator had come through with detailed background information on Jacob. Mark opened the file, scanning through the contents. Jacob Mitchell, age 36, occupation senior investment manager at Riverside Capital, marital status divorced, 2 years, criminal record, none, financial status high income, significant debt, current address 1103 The Grand, downtown, notable, former gambling addiction, multiple casino debts, cleared 3 years ago. Mark's eyes narrowed at the last detail. A recovered gambling addict with a taste for luxury and married women. How interesting. He wondered if Emily knew about Jacob's past or if she cared. In her blind pursuit of excitement, she'd latched onto a man whose carefully polished exterior masked significant flaws. The sound of laughter drew his attention back to the restaurant window. Emily was touching Jacob's arm, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at Mark in years. The sight should have hurt, but Mark felt only cold determination. Let them laugh. Let them think they were untouchable in their little bubble of adultery and deceit, that he had plans for both of them. Mark's phone chimed with another email, this time from his lawyer. The divorce paperwork was ready, but Mark had asked him to hold off filing. He wanted everything in place before he made his move. Emily thought she'd broken him, reduced him to a passive observer of his own humiliation. She would learn differently. Very differently. Opening his notebook again, Mark began sketching out the next phase of his plan. He had Jacob's schedule, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Now it was time to use them. The man's gambling history was particularly intriguing. Recovered addicts often carry deep fears about their past being exposed, especially in professional settings. The darkness fell over the city. Mark watched Emily and Jacob enjoy their expensive dinner, paid for with his money. Soon they would discover the true cost of their affair. But not yet. For now, he would continue watching, learning, planning. After all, revenge, like fine wine, required careful preparation. Mark's office computer pinged with an incoming email from Emily's company server. His anonymous tip about workplace harassment had prompted an internal investigation, exactly as planned. The HR director's response was everything he'd hoped for. Thank you for bringing these concerns to our attention. We take allegations of inappropriate relationships between employees and clients very seriously. Rest assured, this matter will be handled with utmost discretion. A quiet knock on his office door interrupted his reading. Come in. Emily entered, her usual confidence notably diminished. We need to talk. About. Mark continued typing, not bothering to look up. Someone at work. She closed the door behind her. Someone sent photos to HR. Of me and Jacob. Now Mark did look up, his expression carefully neutral. Really? How unfortunate. This isn't funny, Mark. Emily paced the small office. They're launching an investigation. I could lose my job. Sounds serious. Maybe you should have thought about that before fucking a client. Emily's face flushed with anger. Did you do this? Are you the one who sent those photos? Would it matter if I did? God, I knew you were pathetic. But this. She leaned over his desk. Trying to get me fired because I found someone better? Mark stood slowly, meeting her glare. Better? Let's talk about better. Emily. Let's talk about Jacob Mitchell, the gambling addict who's drowning in debt. The man who's been sued twice by former business partners. That's your better option? Emily's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Oh, didn't Loverboy tell you about his past? About the millions he lost at casinos? The loans he's still paying off? Mark pulled out a file and tossed it on the desk. Did he mention he's been sleeping with his secretary too? Or did you think you were special? You're lying. But uncertainty crept into her voice. Jacob would have told me, like you told me about him. Mark's laugh was cold. Face it, Emily. You threw away 8 years of marriage for a man who's just as much a liar as you are. Emily snatched up the file, flipping through the pages. Her hands trembled as she read the private investigator's report, complete with photos of Jacob entering hotels with another woman not Emily. This is... She swallowed hard. This is fake. You fabricated this to hurt me. Like those fake hotel receipts on our joint credit card? The ones you used to fund your little romance? Mark stepped around the desk. Or maybe the fake texts where you mocked me to your boyfriend. Called me weak? Pathetic? Would you like me to quote them? Emily backed away. Stop it. My personal favorite was the one about couples therapy. How did you put it? He actually cried about our emotional connection. God, it was pathetic. That must have given you and Jacob quite a laugh. I never meant to get caught. Mark moved closer, watching her retreat until her back hit the door. To have your perfect little affair exposed? To face consequences for once in your privileged life? What do you want from me? Emily's voice cracked. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. Is that what you need to hear? Mark's expression hardened. What I need is for you to understand something. He planted his hands on either side of her head, trapping her against the door. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react. The weak, passive husband who'd eventually forgive and forget. Emily's breath caught. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. That man is dead, Mark continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. You killed him the moment you decided to betray everything we built together. And the man who replaced him? He's not nearly as forgiving. Are you threatening me? Threatening? Mark stepped back, smiling coldly. No, Emily. I'm promising you. By the time I'm done, you'll understand exactly how badly you underestimated me. He returned to his desk, sitting down as if their conversation had been about nothing more important than the weather. You might want to prepare a good explanation for HR. Those photos are just the beginning. Emily's hand shook as she grabbed the doorknob. You're insane. No. Mark's eyes met hers. I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She fled the office, leaving the file of Jacob's history scattered across the floor. Mark waited until her footsteps faded before pulling out his phone. Time to move to the next phase that he dialed a number he'd memorized weeks ago. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Yeah, Mr. Mitchell? This is Thomas from Riverside Capital's Compliance Department. We need to discuss some concerning transactions we've discovered in your client accounts. On the other end, Jacob's breath hitched. What? What kind of transactions? I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Are you familiar with the Blue Room Bar? Let's meet there tonight at 8. And Mr. Mitchell? I strongly suggest you come alone. Mark ended the call, satisfaction coursing through him. Jacob's gambling history made him the perfect target for this particular fear. The mere suggestion of financial impropriety would have him sweating bullets. Opening his laptop, Mark began preparing for the evening's confrontation. He'd chosen the Blue Room, carefully isolated location, minimal security cameras, private booths where conversations couldn't be overheard. The perfect place for a predator to corner his prey, and Jacob was about to learn just what kind of predator he'd awakened when he decided to pursue a married woman. The Blue Room lived up to its name, casting everything in a dim azure glow that turned shadows into liquid darkness. Mark sat in the furthest booth, watching the door through the bottom of his whiskey glass. He'd arrived an hour early to prepare, choosing his position carefully back to the wall, clear view of both exits, away from the security camera's limited range. At exactly 8, Jacob walked in. The confident swagger Mark had observed outside his apartment was gone, replaced by nervous energy as he scanned the nearly empty bar. Mark allowed himself a small smile. Amazing how quickly the mention of financial irregularities could shake a man's confidence. Mr. Mitchell. Mark raised his hand, pitching his voice slightly lower than usual. Over here, Jacob approached, his expensive suit failing to hide the tension in his shoulders. Are you Thomas? From compliance? Have a seat. Mark gestured to the booth across from him. Can I get you a drink? No, I'd rather discuss these transactions you mentioned. Jacob sat, his fingers drumming against the table. What exactly did you find? Mark took a slow sip of his whiskey. Interesting patterns, similar to ones we've seen before. With your previous gambling issues, the color drained from Jacob's face. How did you know about that? Mark set his glass down carefully. I make it my business to know everything about the men who fuck my wife. Recognition flickered across Jacob's features, followed quickly by fear. You're Mark Harrison, Emily's husband, the one you and she have been laughing about in your texts. Mark's smile never reached his eyes. Though I doubt you'll find this conversation very amusing. Jacob started to stand. I'm leaving. Sit down. Mark's voice carried enough quiet authority that Jacob hesitated. We haven't finished our discussion about your indiscretions. Look, Jacob settled back into his seat, trying to regain his composure. What happened with Emily? It's complicated, but it's between consenting adults. Complicated? Mark leaned forward. Let's simplify it. You pursued a married woman. You helped destroy an 8-year marriage. You mocked and humiliated her husband in private messages. Does that about cover it? If you're looking for an apology? Mark's laugh was sharp enough to make Jacob flinch. From a man who called me, and I quote, a pathetic cuck who needs his balls back? No, I don't want your apology. I want something else entirely. Jacob's hand crept toward his pocket. If you're threatening me, the phone won't help you. Mark pulled out Jacob's iPhone, placing it on the table between them. Amazing how easily people leave their cars unlocked during their morning gym routine. Real fear crept into Jacob's eyes as he patted his empty pocket. What do you want? Want? I want you to understand something. Mark's voice dropped to a near whisper. Every action has consequences. Every choice creates ripples. You chose to pursue my wife, to mock my pain, to revel in my humiliation. Now it's time to face the ripples. Is that supposed to scare me? Jacob tried to sound confident, but his voice wavered. I've dealt with angry husbands before. Have you? And did those husbands know about the $2 million you lost at the Bellagio? Or the loans you're still paying off? How about the insider trading investigation that got quietly buried 3 years ago? Jacob's face went ashen. How did you, or perhaps, Mark continued as if Jacob hadn't spoken, they knew about your current activities? The creative accounting you've been doing with client funds? Amazing what a good private investigator can uncover. You're bluffing. Am I? Mark pulled out a thick folder. Would you like to see the documentation? The bank records? The witness statements? I'm sure the SEC would find it fascinating reading. Jacob's hands shook as he reached for the folder. What do you want from me? First, you're going to end things with Emily. Today. No explanations, no goodbye fuck, no closure. You're just going to disappear from her life. And if I refuse? Mark's smile widened. Then this folder goes to the SEC, your firm's board of directors, and every client whose money you've been playing with. How long do you think you'll last in prison, Jacob? With your pretty face and expensive tastes? You're insane, Jacob whispered. No, I'm just no longer playing by the rules you expected. Mark stood slowly. You have 1 hour to end it with Emily. Then you're going to take a job offer in another city. I hear Seattle has an opening that would suit you. And if you ever contact Emily again, if you ever breathe a word of this conversation to anyone. He let the threat hang in the air. Jacob stared at the folder, his face a mask of defeat. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Almost. Mark's fist connected with Jacob's jaw before the other man could react, sending him sprawling from the booth. That was for calling me pathetic. What followed was a blur of violence, precise and calculated. Mark had chosen this isolated corner of the bar for a reason. By the time the bartender noticed the commotion, it was over. Mark stood over Jacob's crumpled form, breathing heavily. Remember this moment the next time you think about pursuing a married woman. Remember what happened when you chose the wrong husband to mock. He picked up Jacob's phone, placing it next to his head. 1 hour. End it with Emily, or the folder goes public. And Jacob? He knelt down, his voice dropping to a whisper. If you ever breathe a word of what happened here, I'll make sure everyone knows about the things you do with your secretary in the conference room after hours. I have video of that too. Mark straightened his jacket and walked out, leaving Jacob groaning on the floor. In his car, he pulled out his own phone, checking the time. Emily would be waiting for Jacob's usual evening call. Instead, she would receive a brief text ending their affair, followed by silence. Phase 2 of his plan was complete. Now for the final act, opening his laptop. Mark began composing emails to Emily's closest friends and colleagues. Each would receive carefully selected evidence of her infidelity, her cruel messages, her betrayal. By morning, her entire social circle would know exactly what kind of person she really was. Emily had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her boring marriage. Mark smiled grimly as he worked. She was about to get more excitement than she'd ever bargained for. Emily burst into Mark's home office at midnight. Her mascara streaked down her face, phone clutched in her trembling hand. What did you do? Mark looked up from his computer with practiced indifference. You'll have to be more specific. Jacob. Her voice cracked. He ended everything. Just a text saying it's over, and now he won't answer my calls. His number's disconnected. She slammed her hands on his desk. What did you do to him? Me? Mark's eyebrows rose. I've been here all evening working. Maybe he finally developed a conscience. Liar. Emily's shriek echoed off the walls. This is you written all over it. First the photos at work. Now this. Sounds like your perfect romance isn't so perfect after all. Mark turned back to his computer. Though I'm curious, did he mention the secretary he was also sleeping with? Or did that not come up in your intimate conversations? Emily's face went pale. What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't know? Mark pulled up a video file, turning the screen toward her. The security footage clearly showed Jacob and his secretary in an intimate embrace. Guess you weren't as special as you thought. This can't be real. Unlike your fake conferences and late meetings. Mark's voice hardened. Tell me, Emily, how does it feel to be on the receiving end of betrayals? She sank into a chair, her anger crumbling into despair. Why are you doing this? Why? Mark stood slowly. Because you destroyed everything we built together. Because you mocked me, humiliated me, treated my love like a weakness to be exploited. He moved around the desk. Because you needed to learn that actions have consequences. So this is revenge. Emily's laugh was hollow. Destroying my career? Ruining my relationship? No, this is just the beginning. Mark leaned against his desk. You see, while you were busy playing your little games, I was planning, learning, preparing. For what? For the moment when you realize exactly how badly you underestimated me. Mark's smile was cold. Did you check your email tonight? Or your social media? Emily's eyes widened. She grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she opened her email. Her gasp told him the moment she saw it dozens of messages from friends and colleagues, all responding to the evidence he'd sent them of her affair. You didn't. Every message where you mocked our marriage. Every cruel joke about my attempts to save our relationship. Every detail of your sordid little affair. Mark watched her scroll through her phone in horror. I sent it all. These are private messages. Emily's voice rose with panic. You had no right, like you had no right to share intimate details of our marriage with your lovers? Mark's voice was razor-sharp. To laugh about our therapy sessions? To mock my pain for his entertainment? Tears streamed down Emily's face as she read message after message from friends expressing their disgust, their disappointment, their shock at her betrayal. I'll lose everything, she whispered. Now you understand how it feels. Mark returned to his seat. To have your life dismantled piece by piece. To watch everything you built crumble around you. Emily stood on shaking legs. I'll tell everyone what you did. How you stalked us, hacked our phones. Go ahead. Mark's calm never wavered. Tell them how your husband discovered your affair. How he found evidence of your betrayal. How he exposed your lies. He leaned forward. Who do you think they'll sympathize with, Emily? The faithful husband who uncovered his wife's infidelity? Or the cheating wife who destroyed her marriage for a man who was sleeping with his secretary? She staggered back as the full weight of her situation hit her. This isn't you. The Mark I knew would never. The Mark you knew died the moment he read those messages. He turned back to his computer. The man you're dealing with now is someone entirely different. Someone you created with your betrayal. I'll fight you on this. Emily's voice shook despite her attempt at defiance. The divorce, the house, everything. Mark's laughter was cold. With what evidence? What lawyer? What money? He met her eyes. Check our joint account balance. She fumbled with her phone again. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers he'd made. That's... She swallowed hard. That's our savings. Half of it, yes. My half. Mark's smile was predatory. Legally transferred after documenting your infidelity. Good luck explaining those hotel receipts to a divorce judge. Emily sank back into the chair, all fight leaving her body. What do you want from me? I want you to understand something. Mark stood, walking to where she sat. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react to your betrayal. You called me weak, pathetic, safe. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper. But you forgot something crucial, Emily. The most dangerous predators are the ones that wait patiently in the shadows, watching, learning, planning their attack. You're insane, she whispered. No, I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. He straightened up. Now, I suggest you start looking for a new place to live. And a good lawyer. He returned to his desk. Though I doubt you'll find one willing to take your case once they see the evidence I've compiled. Emily stumbled to her feet and fled the office. Mark listened to her footsteps race up the stairs, followed by the slam of the guest room door. He opened his laptop, checking the timestamp on the scheduled email set to go out tomorrow morning. More evidence, more revelations, more carefully planned destruction of Emily's carefully constructed world. She thought this was the end. She had no idea it was just the beginning. Emily stared at her computer screen, her hands frozen over the keyboard as email after email flooded her inbox. Each notification sound felt like another nail in her coffin. Her colleagues' responses ranged from professional disappointment to personal disgust, all reacting to the evidence Mark had distributed of her affair. Emily, her boss's voice made her jump. My office. Now. The walk down the office corridor felt like a march to the gallows. Every eye followed her progress, whispers trailing in her wake. Inside the office, Mr. Davidson sat behind his desk, his expression grave. Close the door. Emily's hands trembled as she complied. Sir, I can explain. Explain what, exactly? He gestured to his monitor. The inappropriate relationship with a client? The misuse of company resources to conduct your affair? Or perhaps the explicit photos taken in our conference room? Those photos were private. Nothing is private when it involves company liability. Davidson's voice was ice. Do you have any idea the position you've put us in? Jacob Mitchell isn't just any client. His firm represents millions in annual revenue. Emily sank into a chair. I never meant to get caught. Davidson slid a document across his desk. This is your termination notice. We'll pay out your remaining vacation days, but I need your badge and parking pass now. You're firing me? Just like that? Just like that? His laugh was bitter. Emily, half our clients received emails detailing your indiscretions. Photos, text messages, explicit descriptions of acts performed in company facilities. He leaned forward. You're lucky we're not pursuing legal action for breach of contract. This isn't fair. Emily's voice rose with desperation. Mark did this. He's trying to destroy me. Your husband? Davidson's eyebrows rose. The same husband you mocked in messages to Mitchell? The one you betrayed and humiliated? He shook his head. From where I'm sitting, you destroyed yourself. Please. Tears streamed down Emily's face. I'll do anything. Take a pay cut. Transfer departments. Clean out your desk by noon. Davidson's tone brooked no argument. Security will escort you out. Emily stumbled from the office in a daze. At her desk, whispers and stares followed her every move as she packed her personal items into a cardboard box. 8 years of career building. Gone in a morning, her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Rebecca. How could you? Those messages about Mark during therapy. That's beyond cruel. Don't contact me again. Another notification. Her sister's message. Mom's crying. Dad can't even speak, he's so ashamed. Hope the affair was worth destroying our family. Message after message, each one severing another relationship. By the time security arrived to escort her out, Emily's entire social circle had crumbled. That eye in her car. She tried calling Jacob again. His number was still disconnected. His office claimed he'd accepted a position in Seattle, effective immediately. No forwarding contact information available. Damn you, Mark, she whispered, gripping her steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Damn you to hell. Her phone rang, speaking of the devil. She answered with a snarl. Happy now? You've ruined everything. Everything. Mark's voice was calm. No, Emily. This is just the beginning. What more could you possibly do? Check your email. I just sent you something interesting from our joint account. Emily's hands shook as she opened her banking app. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers, half their savings gone. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And did. All perfectly legal. Documented after discovering your infidelity. She could hear the smile in his voice. Good luck paying for that luxury apartment you've been eyeing. Or a decent lawyer. I'll fight you on this, Emily threatened. I'll tell everyone what you did. What I did. Mark's laugh was cold. You mean discover my wife's affair? Expose her betrayal? Document her cruelty? His voice hardened. Go ahead. Tell everyone. Show them the messages where you mocked me during therapy. Where you brag about sexual acts with Jacob that you denied me. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Why are you doing this? Because you thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react. The weak, passive husband who'd eventually forgive and forget. A pause. You forgot something crucial. Emily, the most dangerous predators are the ones that wait patiently, planning their revenge. You're sick, she whispered. No, I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. The sound of typing came through the phone. Oh, and Emily, you might want to start looking for a new gym. I just forwarded those texts about your trainer to the owner. Seems you have quite a pattern of inappropriate relationships. The line went dead before she could respond. Emily sat in her car, watching former colleagues stream past, carefully avoiding her gaze. Her phone continued buzzing with messages, friends unfriending her on social media, family members expressing their disgust, professional contacts severing ties. That email notification caught her eye. Divorce papers from Mark's lawyer. The documentation was comprehensive, leaving her no room to contest anything. Every betrayal, every cruel message, every misused joint fund, all carefully cataloged and presented. Emily's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she could do nothing but watch it fall. The apartment felt cold and empty, a far cry from the luxury condo Emily had imagined sharing with Jacob. Instead, she sat on a second-hand couch in a one-bedroom unit on the wrong side of town, all she could afford after Mark's systematic dismantling of her finances. Her phone rang, displaying her mother's number. Emily's hand hovered over it, hope fluttering in her chest. After 3 weeks of silence, maybe how could you? Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. Your father had to leave church this morning. Everyone was talking about those messages you sent. Those things you wrote about Mark. Emily's throat tightened. Mom, please, he loved you. Supported you. And you. A sob broke through the line. You mocked him when he cried during therapy? Shared intimate details of your marriage with that man? I made a mistake. Her mother's voice hardened. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did. Another pause. Don't call us again, Emily. Not until you understand what you've done. The line went dead. Emily stared at her phone. Another piece of her world crumbling away. Her social media accounts where Ghost Town's friends and family had either blocked her or posted public messages condemning her actions that a knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find a courier holding a package. Emily Harrison? Yes. Sign here. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it, then dropped it with a scream. Inside, perfectly preserved, lay a piece of male anatomy. Underneath it, divorce papers waited for her signature. Her phone rang again. Mark, you. She could barely form words. You monster. Monster? Mark's voice was eerily calm. Interesting choice of words from someone who laughed at her husband's pain, who mocked his attempts to save our marriage. What did you do to Jacob? I simply helped him understand the consequences of his actions. A pause. Don't worry, he'll live. Though his love life might be somewhat diminished. Emily ran to her bathroom, retching into the toilet. When she returned to the phone, Mark was still there. Why? She whispered. Why go this far? Because you needed to learn something? Mark's voice took on a teaching tone. Actions have consequences. Choices create ripples. You chose to betray me, to humiliate me, to treat my love as weakness. Another pause. Now you're experiencing the ripples. I'll go to the police. With what evidence? An anonymous package? And how will you explain the contents of your phone? The messages to Jacob? The photos? Mark's laugh was cold. Face it, Emily. You have nothing. Emily sank to her floor, bones turning to water. What do you want from me? Want? I have everything I want. Your career is in shambles. Your lover is gone. Your friends and family have abandoned you. She could hear him shuffling papers. Oh, and the divorce is final next week. I assume you can't afford to contest it? Tears streamed down Emily's face. I never thought, never imagined. That's your problem, Emily. You never thought, never imagined that your safe, predictable husband could be anything more than what you assumed. His voice hardened. You saw what you wanted to see. The weak man. The pushover. The one you could betray without consequences. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. There's nothing left to do. Your life, as you knew it, is over. Mark's tone was matter-of-fact. The career you built? Gone. The social circle you cultivated? Destroyed. The man you thought would give you excitement? Disappeared. A final pause. All that's left is for you to understand exactly how badly you underestimated me. Mark, goodbye, Emily. Enjoy your new life. I hear the diner on 5th is hiring waitresses. The line went dead. Emily stared at the package on her floor, her mind racing with implications. Jacob's sudden disappearance. The piece of him left as a warning. The complete destruction of her carefully built life. She'd thought she knew her husband. Thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. Instead, she'd awakened something darker, more calculating than she could have imagined. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Her bank account was overdrawn. Credit cards maxed out. The meager savings she'd managed to hide gone. Mark had thought of everything. Every escape route, every possible refuge, every potential ally. He'd cut them all off one by one, until she was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. The divorce papers seemed to mock her from inside the package. Her hands shook as she reached for them, knowing she had no choice but to sign. No money for a lawyer. No evidence that wouldn't further incriminate her. No options left. Emily Harrison, who had once had everything, sat alone in her cheap apartment, surrounded by the ruins of her life. Finally understanding the full cost of underestimating a man's capacity for revenge. Mark stood in his empty house, surveying the bare walls where photos of his life with Emily once hung. The moving company had taken the last of his belongings that morning. All that remained was a laptop on the kitchen counter and a single envelope. His phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. Divorce finalized. Papers signed. You're officially a free man. A smile crossed his face as he opened his laptop, checking his encrypted email account. Multiple messages confirmed his plans were in place. New identity papers waiting in a safety deposit box. Offshore account secured. Job lined up in another city under his new name. His phone rang Emily's number. After a moment's consideration, he answered. I signed them. Her voice was hollow, defeated. The divorce papers. You won. Won. Mark leaned against the counter. This wasn't a game, Emily. This was consequences. You destroyed everything. The words came out as a whisper. My career, my friendships, my family, no. Mark's voice hardened. You destroyed those things the moment you chose to betray our marriage. I simply made sure everyone saw who you really are. And Jacob? What you did to him? Consider it a parting gift. Something to remember me by. Mark opened the envelope on the counter, admiring his new driver's license. Though I doubt either of you will forget. A choked sob came through the line. I never thought you could be so cruel. That was your mistake. Mark's voice was eerily calm. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict my reactions based on who I pretended to be. He paused. You never considered that your safe, predictable husband might be capable of something more. The police will do nothing. Mark cut her off. No evidence. No witnesses. Just the ramblings of a disgraced woman who betrayed her husband. He smiled. Besides, I'll be gone before you hang up this phone. Gone? Fear crept into Emily's voice. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. New name. New city. New life. Mark closed his laptop. The man you married? He no longer exists. You killed him with your betrayal. You can't just disappear. Actually, I can. And will. Mark picked up his keys. The house is yours, by the way. My final gift. Though you might have trouble keeping it on a waitress's salary. Please, Emily's voice cracked. Don't do this. It's already done. Mark walked to the front door. Goodbye, Emily. I hope the excitement you craved was worth the price. He ended the call and blocked her number. Outside, his new car waited in the driveway, sleek, black, untraceable. Everything he owned now existed under his new identity. Carefully constructed over months of planning, his phone buzzed one final time. A message from his private investigator, confirming Jacob had taken the job in Seattle. The man hadn't been seen in public since their encounter at the Blue Room, and rumors swirled about his sudden health issues. Mark smiled as he started the car. Everything had played out exactly as planned. Emily's life was in ruins, her reputation destroyed, her lover permanently marked by his revenge. The carefully crafted facade she'd built around herself had crumbled, revealing the truth of her character to everyone who knew her. Today, as he pulled out of the driveway for the last time, Mark glanced in his rearview mirror. The house where he'd lived with Emily grew smaller, along with the life he was leaving behind. 8 years of memories, tainted by betrayal. Now reduced to nothing more than a lesson in consequences, his new identity waited in the envelope beside him. New papers, new background, new beginning. The offshore accounts held enough money to start fresh. While Emily would spend years rebuilding from the ashes of her former life, the highway stretched before him, leading to a city where no one knew his name or his story, where he could rebuild without the shadow of betrayal hanging over him. He'd planned every detail, considered every angle, ensured that his revenge was as complete as it was untraceable. Emily had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her safe, predictable marriage. Instead, she learned a crucial truth. The most dangerous predators are the ones that hide in plain sight. Waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike, Mark merged onto the interstate, leaving behind the ruins of his old life. In his mind, he could see Emily standing in her cheap apartment, staring at divorce papers and a gruesome reminder of the consequences of betrayal. He could imagine her checking her empty bank accounts, her silent phone, Her absent friends and family, she had thought him weak, had believed she could walk away unscathed from her betrayal. Now she understood exactly how wrong she had been. The highway signs blurred past as Mark drove toward his new life. Behind him lay the wreckage of his revenge, a devastated wife, a mutilated lover, a marriage destroyed by betrayal. Ahead lay freedom, a fresh start, and the satisfaction of knowing he had made them pay for every moment of humiliation. They had underestimated him, mistaking patience for weakness, calculation for cowardice. That mistake had cost them everything. The sun set behind him as Mark drove away from his old life, his revenge complete, his enemies broken, and his future wide open. Emily and Jacob would spend the rest of their lives dealing with the consequences of their choices, while he disappeared into a new identity, leaving behind nothing but the memory of what happens when you mistake a predator for prey.